Good morning, everyone. We welcome you all to the second International Business Analytics Conference 2022, conducted by the Business Analytics Department at KJ Somaiya Institute of Management, partnered with New Jersey City University. I, Asa Kara, will be your host for this conference along with Prajwal. Business analytics is the process of transforming data into insights to improve business decisions. Data management, data visualization, predictive modeling, data mining, forecasting simulation, and optimization are some of the instruments used to create insights from data. While business analytics leans heavily on statistical, quantitative, and operational analysis, it involves an iterative, methodical exploration of an organization's data to drive decision-making. Moving ahead, we now introduce the Director of KJ Somaiya Institute of Management and Dean of Faculty of Management Studies at Somaiya Vidya Vihar University, Dr. Monica Khanna. She is an experienced professional with 29 years of experience in academia and industry. Her areas of specializations include brand management, services marketing, and marketing management. Dr. Khanna is currently a PhD guide with University of Mumbai and Somaiya Vidya Vihar University, and is also an elected member of the Executive Council of the All India Management Association, New Delhi. We'd now request her to take the stage and say a few words. Ma'am, you are on mute.
Ma'am, you are on mute. A very good morning to all of you. And thank you so much for such a warm introduction and a welcome. I'm really happy to be part of the second International Business Analytics Conference. The Department of Business Analytics, we have created it in the year in July 2020, looking at the importance that the subject of business analytics is converting into. And so we thought that this is a very important area of study and a lot of knowledge, not only dissemination, but also the research aspect is very important as far as this business analytics subject is concerned. So keeping that in mind, we have created this department, and I'm very happy in the manner in which the department is shaping itself, because as a management institute, we should not just be knowledge disseminators, but we should also be knowledge creators. And these are the very platforms where such possibilities are can exist. So when I was just trying to prepare for the message that I'm supposed to deliver today for the Business Analytics Conference, I came across a very interesting quote, and it says that truly successful decision-making relies on the balance between deliberate and instinctive thinking. I think this is something which really is very important, because we have such volumes of data today with us. And though we are analyzing the whole thing, we are collecting, we are analyzing, we deliberate upon the whole thing, but also a portion of our decision making should be dependent on the instinctive thinking that we have and the connection with the ground realities that we have. And specifically, the use of digital and social media has seen a quantum jump in the post-COVID era. The 2020 Deloitte report on digital media trends, that is the 16th edition of the report, towards the metaverse, that's the title of the report. It discusses about how social media has expanded and evolved dramatically. Social media services now deliver finely tuned and personalized feeds of images, video, music, news, gaming, and shoppable media to billions of users, all lit up by social networking and provided for free. Now, you must be wondering, why am I talking about social media here? But this implies that every individual and organization is a repository of stories and data, leading to an implosion and explosion of data and data points, and generating billions of data points at any given moment of time in the world. And this data is both visual and verbal in nature. And only advanced data analytics techniques are required or are capable of creating meaningful insights for such huge amounts of data that is being generated at every second. Realizing the importance of analytics and its applications in the current business environment and going forward into the future, So that's why KJ Somaiya Institute of Management at Somaiya Vidya University, we have taken this lead and we have created this platform in order to help us to understand in what way data can help us in business decision making. The second edition of this conference is another milestone in the journey of the Department of Business Analytics to create and disseminate usable knowledge in the field of business analytics. I would like to take this opportunity to compliment the Department of Business Analytics for taking this lead and inviting illustrious national and international speakers for the keynote address and for the pre-conference workshop that was done on machine learning a few days back. This conference has attracted very good research abstracts, and I'm sure this is the start of a very good moment in developing the knowledge base in the area of business analytics for the department and for the institute. I would like to wish the conference organizers the very best of success, and I wish a lot of insights and a lot of takeaways for all the delegates and the participants at this conference. So on behalf of the Somaiya Vidya University, the Honorable Chancellor, the Honorable Vice Chancellor, our Registrar, and all my faculty, colleagues, and the students, I take this opportunity to welcome you all to this conference, and I wish you the very best. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Thanks for sharing the importance of data and business analytics. Very glad to hear from you. So coming to the next guest, we would now like to introduce the Associate Professor and the Area Chairperson of Business Analytics of KJ Somaiya Institute of Management, Dr. Sanjeevani Kumar. Dr. Sanjeevani is a Science and Management postgraduate with IPBA in Business Analytics from IIM Indore and has completed her PhD from SNDT University. Her 20 years of experience is a good mix of industry and academia. She has published and presented national and international papers in the research forums. To name a few, International Journal of Applied Finance and Banking, Journal of Medical Marketing, Review of Integrative Business and Research, and she has also conducted various management development programs for IMS Hamla and Mahindra & Mahindra. She received the Academia Excellence Award from Somaiya Trust, Mumbai in 2013 and Best Research Paper Award in Asia Pacific Business Research Conference of East Asia Institute of Management, Singapore in 2017 and SIGTIM in 2022. We now request Dr. Sanjeevani to take the stage and address the audience.
Thank you, Prajwal, for the warm introduction. A very good morning to all dignitaries on the virtual dais. Keynote speaker, Dr. Rajesh Srivastava, industry speaker, Mr. Mohan Bhatia, guest speaker, Dr. Vivek Belhekar, Dr. J.D. Jayaraman, Chair of Department of Finance and Data Science, Dr. Monica Khanna, Madam, Director of KJ Somaiya Institute of Management, all the international and national delegates, faculty members, and my dear students. It is a proud moment for the Business Analytics Department of KJ Somaiya to welcome you all for the second International Business Analytics Conference in partnership with New Jersey City University, NJCU. Currently, many businesses are adopting big data and data science to improve efficiency, increase market reach, boost sales, and introduce new processes and solutions. This, in turn, creates a space for business analytics. And with this foresight, KJ Somaiya Institute of Management established the Business Analytics Department in 2020 with the vision to deliver an enriching, data-driven, and research-oriented educational experience that helps students and executives to unlock opportunities in the analytical domain that will further enhance their careers. The mission of the Business Analytics Department is to continuously upgrade the analytical skill set, which helps to develop a talent pool for future leaders who are digitally intelligent, analytically relevant, and ethically sensitive. The department offers various subjects like statistical analysis, research method, data sciences, management science, big data analytics, interactive dashboarding techniques in all the functional areas like retail, sports, healthcare, to management students as well as PhD scholars with the fundamental technique and hands-on experience on the latest softwares. SPSS, Amos, RStudio, Stata, Doubly, Python, and machine learning are few to name here. To meet the demands of ever-changing analytics domain, the faculty members of Business Analytics Department continuously upgrade their analytical skills by undergoing various development programs like StatsGraph, NVivo, SAS, machine learning, Google Studio, bibliometric analysis, Atlas, and social media network techniques, again, to just specify a few. Updation and adaptability is the key to survival. In recent times, business analytics has been an area of critical focus. With the multitude of data floating in all verticals of business, such as marketing, sales, finance, and social media, etc., it becomes essential to analyze and understanding data to make better decisions and market development. It gives me immense happiness to share that within a short span, faculty members have developed and floated various short-term training programs in the relevant industry area, like business analytics for predictive and prescriptive analysis using R, analytical insights on importance and use of demographic and healthcare data, interactive dashboards, and data storytelling. The Business Analytics Department is engaged in various consultancy and funded research projects like impact of microfinance on enhanced well-being of self-help group women in pre- and post-COVID scenario. This year, 2022, we planned the second International Business Analytics Conference. We organized a pre-conference workshop on machine learning by Professor Dr. Vivek Belhekar from the Department of Applied Psychology, University of Mumbai. We got a huge appreciation from academia and industry for this workshop. We also received research paper from partner university, NJCU, on risk awareness measures, option, price predictability, neural networks, cloud kitchens, and microfinance, which are truly made the Business Analytics Conference interdisciplinary. We're extremely thankful to the management of Somaiya Vidyavihar University for providing us with this platform to organize an international conference on business analytics, which has given us the opportunity to interact across globe. The conference will definitely offer a networking platform for academia, executives, and practitioners to prepare way ahead in analytics. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, for shedding light on the importance and scope of business analytics. We now welcome Dr. J.D. Jayaraman, Chairperson at the Department of Finance and Data Science at New Jersey City University. Dr. Jayaraman has over 20 years of experience in the financial services industry, primarily in the areas of algorithmic trading, risk management, energy markets, and financial technology, prior transitioning to academics. He completed his MBA from BIM Trichy and earned his PhD from Oklahoma State University. His research examines the use of innovative teaching methods, cutting-edge technology, artificial intelligence, and behavioral science to engage students and improve financial literacy. He also works on applications of machine learning and artificial intelligence for social welfare and has a number of publications to his name. Sir, we are elated to have you with us and we request you to say a few words.
Thank you. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. Good morning, everyone. And it's actually late in the night here, so it's kind of weird to say good morning. Good morning, everyone. And I would like to start by congratulating the Somaiya team for putting together this conference. I really commend the team for taking the initiative in bringing together students, academics, and practitioners in this field of future. We at NJCU, we are very happy to be partnering with Somaiya in this initiative. I would really like to take this opportunity to thank Professor Shweta ma'am and Professor Sanjivani ma'am for the excellent job they've done in organizing and coordinating with us. I know is to organize and conduct a conference. I did it myself a few years back, and then I swore I'll never do it again. Right? So I know how hard it is, all the logistics and everything that goes into putting together something like this. Kudos to you. So let me People before me have eloquently articulated the importance of data and analytics and so on, right? So I do not need to pontificate about the benefits of data, especially to this audience. But I really would like to offer my 2 cents just to provoke some thought, just to, light the fire and get people thinking. So I'm sure many of you have heard this cliche that data is the new oil, right? I've read it so many times, heard so many people say it, and each time I hear it, I get mad. It's like, feel like strangling somebody, right? It's like this whole comparison of data with oil, and this type of thinking where you say data is like oil kind of promotes thinking of data as a commodity that can be kind of ruthlessly exploited for the benefit of few, right? So when we take this view, what happens is that we lose sight of the human aspect of data, the people side of data, right? And we put all the focus on the technology, the algorithms, and those type of things. So things like privacy issues, ethical issues in how we collect and share data, inherent bias in algorithms that we use. And nowadays, it's incorporated in everything that we do, literally, right? And those biases that are in those algorithms, and these enter in various different ways, and many of us don't even think about it or don't even know about it, right? And then the environmental impact of big data and algorithms, all these things fall by the wayside when we start thinking of data as a commodity, and we fall into this trap of just focusing on the technology, creating the next big algorithm, going from 1 trillion parameters to 2 trillion parameters, so where does it end, right? So this whole idea is kind of what I want to kind of point out. And I want, this is again, just to stroke some thought and just to offer some opinion that can make us think a little differently. As we as data scientists and academics and students of data science, we should have these type of environmental impacts, these type of human impacts. These things affect us every day, right? So these are the things that we should try to incorporate in our work and in the way we think. So, in my opinion, I'm guilty of this myself. As all these years, I'm a technologist. I'm a math guy. I'm a quant guy, and I keep focusing on the technology, the algorithms, and how do you better this? How do you better that using technology? But off late, I've been fascinated by the human side of data and algorithms and the ethical side and all those. I think from my opinion, the future of data science is not just all about designing the next best algorithm, or in figuring out the next best technology. It is also about taking a much broader view of things and trying to incorporate humanities into the sciences, right? And think about things open up your mind and think about all the impacts that these things that are going to be the future, right? How do they impact? And if we think about that, maybe the way we develop those technologies and the way we invent those algorithms and the way we train these algorithms, everything will start to change. There's huge environmental impact from these algorithms, right? Nobody thinks about it much. We just, and what does that do? It concentrates the power amongst a few companies like the Googles and the Facebooks of the world, right? So how do we democratize that? These are the things that I think is the future of data science, and not just algorithms and technology, right? Of course, the algorithms and technology are really important, but my point is you got to bring in both, and you got to start opening up your mind and thinking about all these other things. And consequently, it also has to flow into the curriculum in some aspects, right? A lot of our curriculums are always focused on the technology and the algorithms. We got to start incorporating the ethics, the human side of things. And that's the change that I feel, again, this is my personal opinion, where I see the future going. So finally, I wanted to just speak a little bit about New Jersey City University and our collaboration with Somaiya. Our business school, for those of you who don't know, we are located in Exchange Place in New Jersey. It's just across the river from Lower Manhattan and Wall Street. In fact, the area is usually referred to as Wall Street West, because almost all the major banks have offices there. And so it's a great location for students, as there's plenty of job opportunities. And also nowadays, it's become a hub for fintech companies and other startups as well. So we, the School of Business, we offer a master's program, a MS program in business analytics and data science. We offer a MS financial technology, an MS program in information systems, and an MBA in business analytics. Right? So we've been working with Somaiya for a few years, thanks to Professor Neelaganda, Professor Satyendra, and Dean Monica ma'am. We've been having a lot of fruitful discussions on several programs that we could engage in. One of which is, some sort of exchange program where some of your students could spend a semester with us, and I hope that comes to fruition soon, and we can look forward to having some of your students on our campus. And we've been also collaborating on the research front as well, and hopefully in the next month or so, our first collaborative paper hopefully gets published. We are pretty close. So the partnership with Somaiya has been great so far, and I really look forward to more collaboration on multiple fronts, and looking forward to the future. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you, sir. That was truly a different take on business analytics. Technology is definitely a prerequisite as well as the future, but the environmental impacts definitely need to be taken care of in order to grow in all aspects. So now we'll unveil the e-proceedings.
So that was really great video. And we now welcome our guest speakers. So we now welcome our guest speaker, Dr. Vivek Belhekar. He is an associate professor at the Department of Applied Psychology at the University of Mumbai and has been teaching personality process, data science, and psychometrics for the past 20 years. His area of research include personality and culture, conservation psychology, data science, behavioral analytics. He has also authored the book Statistics for Psychology Using R, published by Sage Publications, and has been instrumental in setting up a pre-litigation counsel center at the Mumbai High Court. He has also developed the indigenous psychological tests for five-factor model of personality, cultural dimensions, and many more. Apart from this, he has extensive collaborations with the researchers from universities across the globe, like University of Oregon, Toronto University from Canada, Northern Arizona University, and University of California, USA, and so on. Before inviting Dr. Vivek, there's an instruction for the audience. All the questions are to be directed to Asta in the chat box and will be taken up accordingly. And sir, now we would like to welcome you and request you to take the stage and address the audience.
It's my proud privilege to be a part of this conference. I am truly very happy that this conference is being hosted by KJ Somaiya Institute of Management in collaboration with New Jersey City University and CU on business analytics. And it's such an upcoming field of analytics that we are all excited. We're looking forward to how this field would be useful to all the kind of research that we do. I'm sorry I'm sitting in a car and doing this address. I'm currently doing some research at the Nepal border of India with some tribal communities, and so traveling for that. Sincere apologies for the setup from which I'm doing this address. Let me start with the formal presentation that I have. I hope my screen is visible.
Yes, sir, it's visible.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. So I'm going to talk few things in say 15 to 20 minutes that have been given to me about machine learning and analytics and issues with human data, being a psychologist and being a researcher in the field of psychology, and handling human data with respect to organizations and with the problems associated with human resources data. There are certain things that we have learned over the time, and I wish to share some of those things. I'll also talk a bit about how when we use machine learning, how it can be contrasted with the standard approaches that we have been following for last several decades of our learning exercise. The standard approach of going from theory to data using a very deductive kind of methodology of understanding things. So if you look at the evolution of analytics, right from the beginning when people like Pearson and Fisher and Weldon have started looking at data, the data science was in its inception, and these people have given the basic structure that was needed. If you look at Pearson's work, he spoke about 4 fundamental parameters that were needed to understand any kind of data. Wherein, if you look at Fisher's work, he gave the shape to statistics as an inferential process. And as a result, we moved into some standard experimental methods, which led to the further developments branched into 2 attributes. One is experimental controlled research, and second into the correlational research. from 70s onwards or 80s onwards, we started getting larger data sets. With availability of internet, the big data suddenly became accessible. And then with that access, the machine learning methods were becoming better suitable for the big data and the kind of problems that we face. These are several methods that we use otherwise in any kind of analytics. Typically, we have, when we use machine learning, we have this kind of a structure. There's a variable that needs to be predicted, which is a dependent variable. There are set of predictors, which are called independent variable. And there is some form of functional form of relationship that is either known or predetermined, or that is unknown. And perhaps the nature of variable could drastically vary for different things. Now, when we do machine learning or any kind of standard models, one of the problem that all of us are concerned about is the problem of causality, and I'm going to talk a bit about it. What typically the deductive kind of tradition of any kind of scientific research did is it focused on setting up models where X is a cause and Y is the effect of that cause. X could be any set of variables that we have. Now, when we set up machine learning kind of models or analytic models, we need to be aware of whether we are looking at causes or we are looking at predictors. And they can actually be two separate set of ideas. Otherwise, there are so many instances wherein we have ended up making predictions without having any causality. Some problems that I see, and since I said I'm going to talk about issues, some problems that we commonly face in any kind of analytics is omitted variable bias, incorrect functional form, reverse causality, sample selection biases, simultaneous causality, and multicollinearity. Now, heteroscedasticity would also be one of the problems. Now, if you look at these problems, some of these problems are very common problems that we face in statistical models, even in simple multiple regression model. Like you have omitted variable bias, incorrect functional form, reverse causality, impacting the standard regression model. But if you look at the machine learning kind of approach or analytics approach, than the analysis approach, and it's not just a twist of two words, analysis versus analytics, but it's basically a complete U-turn of the philosophy of science to discover predictors. And despite that, some of the issues would still remain valid. Say, for example, omitted variable bias. Now, omitted variable bias, once you have data, cannot be corrected. Whatever we do, if the predictor variables miss some information that is essential for the predictions are going to be inferior than what they otherwise are. Most often, like I would perhaps call omitted variable bias the elephant in the room, because often after setting up models and after getting data and after analyzing the data, there is a realization there are perhaps omitted variables, and in most cases nothing much can be done, and this is something that would still remain an issue even if we are using analytics instead of analysis or machine learning kind of an approach. Functional form is a freedom that we get in machine learning, because the machine learning models keep modifying the algorithm depending on the previous errors. And so even if the functional form might be slightly incorrect, it would not really have much of the impact. Since machine learning models at times, particularly supervised models, are recursive in nature, they might actually still be able to predict despite some issue with reverse causality or bidirectionality or simultaneity in causality. Sample selection biases is things that when your data comes from a specific set and your predictions are the attempt is made to predict outside that set or outside that population, then the kind of errors that we face are due to sample selection biases. They are very difficult to kill despite the algorithm or despite the analytic power. The best example in the field of analytics is analysis of CVs of men and women and classification of CVs into, say, most efficient CVs versus inefficient CVs. And people have consistently pointed out ethical issues associated with with the kind of problems that we face when we take a sample of one kind and draw conclusions on the populations that are not belonging to the population from where the sample has been obtained. Particularly when we look at data coming from since we are sitting in India and we're talking about India, data coming from different sources. We often look at the data that are either coming from structured ways of data collection where we actually launch sample surveys or set up some kind of data collection activities, or data coming from unstructured sources like mobile phones and other gadgets, people's login, logout times on websites. Now, when structured data is obtained, structured data come with a limited bandwidth of the data. You can have access to only certain kind of population. So is the case with unstructured data, where the data comes from sources like mobile phones or computer or visits to internet. Given the kind of country we are, such a large country we are, and if you're only talking about India, look at the diversity of languages, some 22 official languages, 3,000 dialects, uh, uh, and we work as a part of our personality culture lab across different languages. And our previous research has consistently showed us that the subpopulations of this country are quite radically different from each other. And the structure of preferences, choices, decision makings don't remain as stable as one would like them to be, to set up models on one kind of population and expect replicability on other kind of population. So sample selection bias typically happens. Quite a few papers have showed us that most of the data that we get even in India are weird data, that is people who are in urban spaces, people who have access to technology, who are educated and belonging to middle class or upper middle class are the people who are amenable to data. And their data is what represented in most of the analytics that we engage in. And this is one common problem when we look at cross collaborations across nations. Whenever, and that's the ethical dilemma I have. Whenever I say that I work in India, I think I make a serious ethical breach, because I actually need to say that I'm working with Tharus on Nepal border. I'm working with urban men and women, young adults in metros like Mumbai and things like that, right? Instead of saying that I'm working in India, because India is not a homogeneous identity, and replicability of models is a problem that if we want to solve, we need to be clearly stating that we are working on some specific aspect or specific population of India. And that's the dilemma that often people in an adventure to claim that their data comes from India, they end up saying that these models or this research has happened in India, which is, I think, is a more of an ethical issue than just correctly saying that it comes from a specific part. Mm. Now, in analytics and machine learning, typically it's a branch of artificial intelligence which looks into making computers learn some of the techniques and develop models and program themselves by using some data. Now, if you look at machine learning, it is basically automation or using data for the purpose of learning. We all know that human learns from past experience and machines learn from instructions given by humans. Can machines learn from the past data and do the job that humans have been doing? And perhaps it's possible. This is what machine learning has taught us. That and then machines might actually be faster, would be learning every instance of the error they have made, and would be better. And doing that perhaps is machine learning. So typically, if we want to set up a machine learning problem, say, for example, we want to predict attrition in an organization, then our attribute that we are interested in predicting is attrition in an organization. And for that matter, we can predict anything. And I'm using the word prediction over explanation consistently. And perhaps purchase of goods, visits to shopping mall, performance of an employee, grades obtained by students, Friday night movie attendance, diagnosis of a disorder or a disease, quality of a relationship, anything for which input-output data is available, one can set a machine learning model. How it works. For example, for this attrition problem, we take last 5 years data of employees who have attrited and employees that who not attrited, and that data can come on several parameters like punch in, punch out time, compensations, benefits, performance ratings over time. As if there is a data that comes from psychometric evaluations and employees have given consent to use this data, then data on engagement, ability, personality scores can also be used with the proper consent and proper informed consent of the employees. And several other demographic data like daily distance of traveling. People from Mumbai would perhaps empathize with this, that if your office is on Western Line and you are living down north on the Central Line, then travel time suddenly becomes an important predictor, and year of experience and things like that would come. Suppose we have data of such 1,000 people, then 10,000 people, then employee status, attrited versus not attrited, is typically called dependent variable. Others are called independent variable. This becomes in a standard statistical model or traditional approach, some kind of regression equation will be set up and model fit will be evaluated. These are the typical ways in which you would do a standard regression equation, and you would set up a model, evaluate a model, and find the overall R square, find the importance of each of the predictor. And we will have issues in these standard regression models like multicollinearity, heteroscedasticity, model specification errors, the measurement errors. I would stop here, and perhaps at a later part, I would talk for 2-3 minutes more on this. Because measurement error is a common problem of behavioral or human data. Whenever we obtain data on humans, the data is never perfect. So any score that we take, say suppose employees liking for the organization, or to what extent, because it is commonly believed that people don't leave organizations, they leave bad bosses. So when you measure attitude towards the boss, the measurement model of the attitude towards boss would be a model with a error, because whatever the reported attitude is function of a latent variable attitude. And look what happens. So suppose you want to predict some y with a x that is measured without error. This is the typical regression model that you have. And if your b is, say, this is a random data that a friend of mine had done experiment with. I'm sharing it with you. If the b is 3, the on an average with a sample of 20, the average value of b would be around 3. But with a measurement error, so where there is a measurement error in the model involved, and not just the error of the model, the standard model would give you a very accurate B value. The simulation is the same model ran several thousand times, and with measurement error model is giving you on an average B at a very wrong place, perhaps around 1, less than 1, where the real value of B is 3. This simulation tells us that when we have measurement error in our models, one, we end up landing at a wrong place. Two, the spread is very wide, and because of which we have serious problem when we have measurement error in our models. So if we make sample size is larger, because if the student comes with this kind of a problem to any supervisor, the standard answer of the supervisors is, let's increase the sample size. People don't understand that they're actually hacking p values by doing so, but nevertheless, by increasing sample sizes, where you go is the same place. What you kill is just the variance of the error, but the basic problem of this is 3 is your mean, and you ended up having a mean of around 1 is still not solved, and that's where the serious problem lies. So these are the typical problems that we need to look at, particularly when we take behavioral sciences data. Now, for this particular problem that we were talking about, attrition, we look at kind of supervised learning as an approach. Typical steps that we take in this is splitting the data into train and test data. So 80% data would be training data, 20% data would be your testing data. We choose some machine learning algorithm. There are several from where we can choose, or we can use all of them, most of them that are suitable, and compare all of them that are used. And then machines are trained on the data with the levels. During this training exercise, machine make mistakes, and algorithm tries to correct those mistakes and keep on repeating it. As a result, algorithm becomes better. So once we have algorithm, which is a suitable algorithm, we move to a testing data set where labels are hidden, and the algorithm classifies, and labels are resupplied, and then accuracy is checked with this cross-validation methods. So this is how typically the machine learning would do. In this case, I would perhaps keep 8,000 cases in training data set and 2,000 cases in testing data set. Develop, I'll use something like CART or SVM or similar algorithms. And at the end of the day, I would use some kind of accuracy metric, confusion metric, or area under the curve, mean absolute error, and so on and so forth. This is an important point that I often want to bring it to the notice of people, whoever is looking at the data. And that is, there are two kinds of errors that we tend to make when we use machine learning models. One is we try to minimize the error within the training data set. And second is we want to minimize the error within the testing data set. The x-axis is a complexity of the model. So as we make models complex, the error within training data set reduces. The green line is error within the training data set. The blue line is error outside, error for the testing data set. And complex models would be applicable to the data that we have, but are not applicable to the data that we don't have. Less complex models are highly erroneous. So we need to find model which perhaps lies somewhere in the golden middle. Any model that would be between this area of complexity is a good model. Skipping this part. Yeah, this is the last point that I want to discuss, and that is when we look at traditional models versus machine learning models with human data. If you look at the history of psychology or behavioral sciences, it was Cronbach who spelled the distinction between correlational experimental methods. Cronbach 1957, very famous paper, where he said experiments are uh, at most important things in psychological research or behavioral research, and they give us causality. Randomized, well-controlled experimental study is a benchmark of a excellent behavioral research. And perhaps you want to make it better, you add double blind for even a tighter control. And you have wonderful experimental procedures that have been developed in this field. Now, what are we looking at by doing experiment? We are looking at deductions. So there's a theory which gives us a hypothesis which is being tested. With machine learnings, what typically happens is we use something which is the second branch of science that Cronbach talks about, and that's correlational research or inductive research, which uses some kind of regression equations or factor analysis kind of approaches for the business data, and perhaps a structural equation modeling kind of approaches, which are kind of quite popular. While doing so, there are things that we need to be really aware of. Some of them I spoke about, and the biggest problem is endogeneity in setting up causality. Replicability has been considered as a serious problem because previous experimental research is still like several standard researches have been like their replicability have been a problem. For example, we work in the field of personality and culture, and consistently we find that the 5-factor model is not supported across various data sets, and generally it's considered to be a decent model of personality. So replicability is an issue. And as I said, by increasing sample size, people end up engaging into p-hacking. Cronbach, in his very famous other paper, argued that social research and behavioral research should be less concerned with hypothesis testing and should be more concerned with interpreting the findings in the local context. And this is what we perhaps can achieve by doing machine learning or analytics. And then we need to look at these kind of debates of predictions versus explanation, because with analytics, perhaps we get a better predictive powers. Whether we get explanatory power or not is something that we do not know, but more often than not, we do not get explanatory power because good explanatory power can obtained through good theory, and necessarily a story that a predictive model tell might not be the best of the theory, or I would perhaps favor a theory, a better theory than a stronger predictive model. And then what is to be given importance to, whether data or theory? In practice, we end up giving a lot of importance to data, but again, that doesn't provide explanatory power. It only provides a predictive power. This is my last slide, and I love this example, and I keep repeatedly giving this example on multiple occasions. And this is the Second World War example, where there's a story of a famous statistician, Abraham Wald. British Air Force was facing a problem that their airplanes were shot down, and this is the typical picture of where all the airplanes that they have analyzed that came to base. They said that these are the places where primarily they took the hit, and so where do we shield? Because if we shield an airplane, we put extra weight to the airplane. and that's a cost benefit that you have to look at. So you can't shield a aeroplane everywhere. So everybody said that, see, these are the wings and the middle portion, and tail should be shielded because that's the place that took most of the hits. Professor Wald was asked about how do we solve this problem, and he said perhaps you need to shield the head and the part of the wings where there are no bullet hits. And people were surprised. How come so? And he had a very nice explanation, very famous explanation. He said, see, you're looking at the airplanes that came back, and that's the only data that you have. The airplanes that didn't come back perhaps were hit at those places where there are no bullets that you get on the airplanes that have come back. Ultimately, it's the story that you create from the data, the understanding that you create from the data that matters, not just the data. It's not the data, but the way you look at the data ultimately would determine what kind of outputs you will get. I'm very sure this conference would look at several of such issues, which are technical and theoretical for the sciences. I am very sure the kind of collaboration Somaiya Institute has developed internationally would help the faculty, students, researchers, and professionals across the disciplines to learn a lot from this conference. I'm very sure that the papers that would be presented in this conference would churn these issues and look at specific uh, applicability in the context where these results are being applied. I wish all the best to all the participants, speakers, and organizers. They've put in a lot of effort, and I'm very sure this conference is going to be a success and will be remembered for a long time. Thank you very much, and wish you all great luck for the conference.
Thank you, sir. That was really inspiring. And we would now like to open the forum for question and answers for the audience. You can either raise your hands or drop in the chat box.
I have one question in the chat box from Dr. Sanjeevni. Since the analytics field is evolving so fast, how does one pace up with updation?
That's a common problem that all of us is going to face. Perhaps you have to decide what is the pace with which you want to learn the new techniques. Do you want to be like a person who is weekly updated? Because updating strategy is a person strategy. It is not a strategy of the science that is, because every science is getting updated. Perhaps every weekend you will have something new that has been discovered. So what is your pace at which you want to learn in that particular area is something that you have to decide. So I'm giving my example. It's not the most suitable one, but this is what I do. And so since it's a question about learning style, I'm sharing what I do. I decide what are the areas in which I want to learn. Say, for example, analytics, machine learning, personality theory, the research done in several other areas of culture. So typically, I keep a goal of learning new thing once, one new thing a month for analytics, and goal of learning one new thing about, say, my core area of personality research and culture research. And so I put, and this emphasis is something that one has to decide what they want to do. It is completely an individual's choice of what kind of learning they are interested in. I always give importance to my own content area, and I keep upgrading analytics comparatively on, say, it is comparatively on the back burner always.
Thank you, sir.
Vivek sir, I have a question.
Yes, sir, I'm there.
Yeah. See, now we have been talking about that p-value and its importance, etc. is well known for everybody. But I believe that there are some movements in, especially in the psychology area. Even Journal of Psychology has decided to chuck the p-value and take research outputs without considering the p-value part of it. They don't assess their research papers on the basis of p-value. So what is your take on that?
Well, the better approach to this is completely checking off p-value will not help if our job is to infer about a population from the sample. The solution people have come up with is pre-registration. When people engage into the act of using p-value to determine significance of their results, they are likely to hack p-values. That is, if with a sample of 100, my results are not significant, I will increase the sample to 150, 200, and so on and so forth. So it is better that I pre-register my research, say that I'm going to have a sample of size 100. I'm going to set my p-value to be 0.01. I will have a power of so and so for this particular statistics. These are the statistical techniques that I'm going to use. These are the set of hypotheses that I have. And once I do the research, well, only with the constraints that I have already specified in the pre-registration, I would evaluate. Now, while writing the paper, I can never ever say that now I have used sample of 150, because while pre-registration, I have stated that my sample is 100. So the problem with p-value is p-value hacking, and that problem perhaps need to be solved if one has to engage in inferring about populations from sample. There's no other way that is possible. Perhaps the other ways is only to deal with the functional forms. Say, for example, if I'm using regression or some kind of inferential statistics, which doesn't, perhaps the sample that I have doesn't follow that functional form, then I can go for something like bootstrapping or those kind of approaches. But I think I strongly believe that using pre-registration is something that will help us deal with this problem. And in our training modules, we should bring in component of pre-registration. And if we have journals and we are sitting on editorial boards of journals, we should be careful that we accept papers that have some pre-registration done. Now, there have been people who have noticed that despite pre-registration, people actually do something else. In pre-registration, they said that the hypothesis will be supported. In actual paper, they said that our hypothesis was to be rejected. So then people have found out that there is a discrepancy. Those authors were banned. And that is how we will bring better standards of doing research. And that is how perhaps replicability can be obtained in our sciences.
Okay, thank you. I have one more question, small question. We always talk about correlation. If we normally say that anything above, let us say, 0.6 or minus 0.6, less than minus 0.6, then it is it's a very good correlation. But in psychology and social sciences related papers, I have seen that they are going for accepting the correlation at a lower level also. So we have been teaching students that you should look for a higher correlation, etc. So what sort of an advice will you give to us in such a case?
This is quite a complicated area. Now, what is high and low is discipline specific. Say, for example, in chemistry, perhaps they look at 0.99 as a okay or acceptable correlation for some of the procedures that they do. So it is dependent on the data, it is dependent on the procedure, and it is within discipline standards that matter more than across discipline standards. That's number one. Number two, Jacob Cohen and others have written wonderful papers and even books on power and effect size, and they have actually looked at this issue of what value of correlation should be considered a decent value. And perhaps, as you've rightly said, sir, your question stems from exactly the kind of research Cohen and his associates have done. But I must bring it to your notice that later on, in his very recent papers, where Cohen initially said that I classify correlations into, say, small, medium, large, etc. Later on in his papers, he actually said that I repent on the kind of classifications that I have created for either effect size or power, and people have kind of started misusing it in a very rampant manner. That's his comment on his own work. So I think within discipline, consistency is more important than comparing the numbers across disciplines, because they might not actually match.
Thank you, sir.
Sir, in this continuation, I would like to share one thing here, that sometimes I have noticed that when the sample size is very huge, and you will find the correlation is not very high, but it is coming significant. So even might be people are considering it or something.
I didn't get the last part. You said,
Sir, like we are talking about the correlation is very low, still we are considering in some of the cases low correlation also. So what's happened when we increase the sample size? The correlation is not very high, but it is coming significant.
that is simply because you increase the power. With increase of sample size, you reduce the beta. You make two kind of errors in hypothesis testing, alpha and beta. Alpha is by setting up the significance level. Beta is by it is ability of a statistical test to reject a false null hypothesis, right? So 1 minus beta, that is power of a statistical test, is ability of a statistical test to reject a null hypothesis when it is false. When we increase the sample size, we increase the power, ability of a statistical test to reject a null hypothesis which is false. So 1 minus beta is really a small value. When we reduce one kind of error, we increase the chance of other kind of error. That's what typically happens in statistical hypothesis testing. So as we increase the power of a statistical test, even the small correlation would get detected as significant. So if you take a data of 10,000, a correlation of 0.01 might also turn out to be significant. We need to check, but perhaps that might happen. We need to be careful about when we have large samples, whether standard significances are really useful, and they're not, as we know. Everything would turn, any statistical test you do would turn out to be significant with that large kind of a sample.
Thank you, sir.
So thank you everyone for the questions. And thank you, sir. Thanks a lot for sharing your experiences and such informative insights on importance of causality, and also on the problems faced in analytics, and explaining how good a statistical model can be. Also, thanks for throwing some light on the process and usage of machine learning by showing some fascinating examples. We would now like to move on to the next guest speaker, and over to you, Asta.
Thank you, Prajwal. The next guest we would like to introduce led his entire professional life around data, artificial intelligence, and machine learning, Mr. Mohan Bhatia. He is a distinguished member of the technical staff in the group of industry thought leaders at Wipro. He leads new age technology projects to redefine technology horizons. Mr. Bhatia leads artificial intelligence initiatives and strategies. He is developing data science, machine learning, natural language processing, robotic process automation, and cognitive computing automation solutions for banking, financial services, and insurance customers. He also specializes in applying artificial intelligence to financial crimes management and risk modeling platforms in KYC, anti-money laundering, sanction screening, anti-fraud, cyber risk, tax compliance, data management, and decision management for BFSI customers. He is now helping BFSI firms to leverage front office digitization for better compliance, customer engagement, and back office automation for building enterprise-wide risk management modeling platforms. Sir, we welcome you and request you to take the stage and address the audience.
Thanks. Thanks for this introduction. And thanks to Somaiya University for inviting me for this. Now to start with, we can take questions online. You can keep typing here and I will pass in between and we can take questions. Now, as a part of my hobby, I do a lot of career counseling, coaching for executives. And one of the questions keep coming to me: what are the high paying areas? What are the high paying opportunities in entrepreneurship? What are the high paying jobs opportunities, etc. So one of the answer is innovation and disruption. And this I have been telling for last 10 years or so. But probably I have now further refined that. Now I keep saying that innovation in business as usual mode. Like we do operations in BAU mode. Every day we keep delivering services. We need to keep doing innovation. And what we can call it actually industrializing the innovation. So that is where the new economy, the new normal is actually moving towards. The new management principles are moving towards. So having been inspired by that, I'll be talking about how do we actually industrialize. Before that, all of us, we must be hearing about Industry 4.0. So if you look at the change in the industry, which actually started what we can call it actually as a Industry 1, as industry which started using mechanical power. Industry 2.0 was industry which started or established the assembly line. Industry 3.0 is when they started using automation and robotics. And Industry 4.0 is when they actually have industrialized the innovation, industrialize the artificial intelligence into their process, or industrialize the, or you can say they have inbuilt the human behavior into their processes. Now, when we expand this, because I come from banking industry, I come from BFSI industry. So when we actually expand this and we compare it back again with the banking industry. So in banking industry, the entire, you can call basically that automation or so-called use of IT started with using mainframes for record keeping. That was banking 1.0. And then we started talking about bank 2.0 with the use of core banking. And banking 3.0 was when we started using or delivering services on mobile banking and internet banking. And we are now talking about banking 4.0, which is to inbuild the intelligence and innovation engines into the business model, to inbuild the human intelligence into the business model. So I'll shift to, I'll present a few slides on that. You can keep typing your questions. I will stop in between. I will pause in between and we can take questions also. So once again, thanks to Somaiya University for inviting me here. this is also, as I said, I got inspired by, because I have been associated with this entire implementation of AI and machine learning for the last 10 years or so for the international customers. And one of the things which actually learning was that if you look at the entire change or entire computerization of banking industry, what banking industry did was that it actually automated the things, it automated the process which were low complex, simple, structured data, high volume. What it left was processes which were complex, which required conversion of human behavior, unstructured data, conversion, experience, it left it behind. And now we actually are talking about this entire, you can say, industrialization of complexity. So the natural extension for business analytics, because most of the time, if you look at the analytics, what we actually have been discussing, doing, etc., is actually dealing with the volume. What we actually are talking about in industrialization, when we call it predictive risk or banking AI and conversational banking, is to industrialize the complexity, which is like human behavior, human being, the AI part of it, which is actually complex, industrialize the complexity. So we actually are trying to move from automation to industrialization. And this is not going to happen in 1 year, 2 years. The way actually industry 2.0, if you look at industry 2.0, it took 70, 80 years since Henry and Ford and everything started. Or if you look at the entire using of mechanical power, it took 200 years when the steam engines were discovered. And it has taken 40, 50 years for robotics and automation to happen. Same thing, if you look at banking industry, it has taken decades to change. So this is basically that decade of changing, basically industrializing the complexity. And this is what we actually are calling it as a banking 4.0. Because this is disruptive, there is no way that we are moving from automation to industrialization in a smooth way. There are large disruption. I call it actually valley of disruption in my book. And whatever fintechs actually are bringing, fintechs actually are trying to position themselves here, while banks are still positioned here. Banks are in that volume automation, dealing with volume, and all the fintechs, that disruption they are bringing is by positioning themselves here. So this is what actually is happening. This is where that high productivity, high risk, high payment, high opportunity are actually that those are coming. High opportunities, entrepreneur opportunities are coming. High paying entrepreneur opportunities are coming. High paying jobs are coming. Now the thing is that why it is happening, and why are we talking about this in 2022, and why we were not talking in 2012, similar type of things. There are external reasons for that, and then there are internal reasons. The most important reason, all of us, we know that demographic for India, for the entire globe, etc. For India, 65% population is less than 35 years of age. So entire this population, 65%, who are the decision makers for all the consumptions, they are born in the internet area. Even if they were born before that, they grew up, they started understanding, the entire awareness in them was created during the internet area. So this generation Z is actually has completely changed its residence. It is no more. So if I look at from banking, their customers are not coming to branches. All of you, actually, all students here, even some of the professors and researchers, you may not be going to branches, you may not be going to internet banking and log in there, but entire decision, entire financing and banking purchase is actually happening from the marketplace. That can be WhatsApp, that can be Google Pay, that may be Amazon, that may be Flipkart, etc. It means basically human beings are not coming to banks for consumption of services. These are the applications which are coming to bank for consumption of services. So human beings actually are now behind those applications. And what banks they get as a customer is application. So if banks need to service the application, they need to upgrade their machines to such a level that as if human beings are running those machines, or they should have intelligence which is as good as the intelligence of human beings. So banks need to upgrade their machines so that they are able to manage the machines behind which human beings are there as a consumer. So that is what is the industrialization requirement. That is where the entire industrialization of intelligence, entire industrialization of innovation is required. Why I'm saying innovation, you know that human mind, it doesn't live in one place actually. It keeps on changing. So it will keep on changing its requirement, etc. So if we need to actually go and map to the human mind, we need to continuously change and innovate from our side as a bank so that we are able to map or match the requirement from that. So that is one. The other thing is that entire world is actually moved to the entire world actually has moved to the low interest rate regime. All of us actually are in this 6% interest rate. Internationally, it is 1%. You must be hearing about Fed wants to increase it. They are trying to increase it 0.25, etc. It is easy to reduce the interest rate, but it is impossible to raise it. Some of you who come from finance background, you will know that what type of return off actually has to be done if interest rate actually has to go up. So it is almost impossible. So this is what is going to be there, at least in the near future, what we can perceive. It has got an impact on the entire BFSI industry because its cost is a substantial portion. So interest at 12% is not same as interest at 6%. Their margins, they go down. So it increased the cost to income ratio. In India, cost to income ratio is between 40 to 60%. It means that 40 to 60% of the gross income of a BFSI firm is actually used for running the organization. And in some of the economies like US and European, it is even 100%. And many times it is more than 100%. So you need to necessarily industrialize so that you are able to contain the cost. The other is this entire fintech, which is actually representing the entire innovation, that entire fintech industry, which actually came as a backup call for this entire BFSI industry. Then they become competitor, then they become partner. Now they have become the benchmark. So the entire narrative for consumption of my services is set by fintech. So whenever you go to the bank, you say that this fintech is offering this. This is the service, this is the cost, this is what, etc. So they are setting the narrative for banking. So if they are setting the narrative for the banking, we need to learn, banking industry need to learn that narrative. And fourth is that regulators, basically, because of the complexity, because monetary policies have become ineffective world over, they actually are trying to cover as much data as possible, to cover as much information, as much data as possible, the entire stress testing and other type of reports, etc. And they have actually grown their reports 10x and 100x in many regimes. They have actually become technology savvy so that they are able to deal with such data. So considering this all four things, in addition to that, that customer actually has relocated, it has relocated behind the cloud, it is residing in the marketplace, and because of the low high cost to income ratio, banks are trying to find out opportunity everywhere. They are actually going beyond banking services to non-banking services so that they can cover the entire customer journey. So here customer journey is that what customer does from morning 5 to midnight 12, or what customer does 24 hours. So how do banks continuously service? You must have seen that the case study of Pepsi and others, that when they actually shifted to water and other business, and they started saying that how they cover the entire day of the customer, so that it's when a person gets up, he starts drinking water and all those type of things. Similar type concept is here, that how do we actually service the customer from the 24 hours, whatever he consumes. Let the bank be there as one of the service provider, one of the product provider, etc. The other thing is, which is very important, enabler, why we are talking 2022, is the development on the technology side. So the ability to deal with data has substantially, exponentially, 100,000 and million times increased. The cost is decreased. The cloud has made a big difference, completely new paradigm it has actually created. And other thing is that the amount of focus and investment which is going on in AI and machine learning, so that we actually are able to create the intelligence very similar to human being. And that is becoming possible only because the technology itself is industrialized. That actually is providing a way to build this entire thing. So coming back, what we are talking, where are the opportunities for all of us? Opportunities are in innovation. Opportunities are innovation in business as usual mode. And entire industry, the physical industry, is doing that as a part of Industry 4.0. Banking industry is doing that as a part of Banking 4.0. I will pause here and take question. Any question? Any question, comment?
Sir, you're on mute. Sorry, can you unmute yourself, please? Yeah.
Sorry. If you look at development in any business analytics, ultimately, the purpose of machine learning and AI is to be able to manage and deal with the complexity. what and how of it, and not simply the problem of dealing with the large data. So that is where that entire thing is. That is why we require industrialization. So how banks actually are doing that? They are establishing what I call actually 6 engines of industrialization. One is that this is basically required to move from the banking 3.0 to 4.0, from automation to industrialization. One is basically creating a business case for the technology investment. Banks are driven by the capital. Capital is the currency of any BFSI. The moment any merger acquisition is announced, first thing they announce is what? They are going to raise capital. You must have seen yesterday news from SDFC. What is the most important news? That they are going to raise 50,000 crores. Capital is the driver. It is the currency. We need to allocate capital for innovation and industrialization by creating the business case that this innovation will be related to this type of business outcomes. And those business outcomes may not come in one quarter. The challenge is they will not come in one quarter. The challenge is they may ultimately get realized over 10 quarters, over 20 quarters. This is going to be a decade of innovation. So one is that establish that entire technology investment framework. Ultimately, what we are talking about. So what is difference between banking 3.0 and 4.0? As far as customers are concerned, it is basically the difference is, am I going to mobile banking or am I getting the digital experience? So digitizing the experience is what is making the difference. We actually, up till now, we have been talking about transactions and banking and mobile, etc., and internet banking, and not the experience. So ATM may be there, but your experience with ATM may not be good. People keep talking about UI, UX, etc., but more than UI, UX is that ATM is down. It does not have cash. They were not able to predict it, that so much amount of cash will be required because of the festivals, etc. They were not able to feed it. That is what is actually the most important thing, in addition to all the UI, UX, etc. So knowing the business is what is going to be very important, as Dr. Jayaraman also mentioned, that knowing the business is actually going to be important more than the technology and other things. So when we are actually mapping both the technology as well as the business experience, and when we talk about digitizing the experience, I'm talking digitizing the experience, it is applicable for both. It is back office as well as front office. So digitizing experience not only for front office, it is also for partners, it is also for employees. Because what is that, why we are talking about this banking 4.0, it is basically to offer the non-banking services. So there will be a substantial number of partners. For example, Citibank has got 22,000 partners. So if their services need to be integrated, then we are talking about digital experience also for partner. So all those marketplaces, they are successful who have actually digitized the experience. Go to Amazon and they have actually digitized. Everything is automated. Your partner, you can get onboarded and you can start selling within next 5 minutes. So that is what is the digitizing the entire experience. Then the third is agility, scalability, and resilience, basically, which is to be part of your BAU, is a part of your innovation, that you actually are able to scale it, make it agile, make it resilient. Then basically the fourth, which is to be built as a part of this, is to create banking AI corpus and services and industrialize the product and build this entire all-pervasive intelligence into the process and technology. Now, when we are starting our career, in the business analytics, generally what we do, we go and learn what Google and Azure are actually giving us. all the libraries we try to learn. We try to learn the libraries provided by the provided as a part of the analytics platform, maybe SAS, maybe Oracle, maybe other, maybe R, etc. Now, if you look at the AI libraries provided by the Google of the world and Amazon of the world, and we are also talking about in the previous session the correlation and p value and the accuracy, etc. Now, if we actually need to build artificial intelligence, we need to compare it with what are the accuracy level, and banking industry is actually a business of accuracy. Now, if you look at parallelly human beings, so when human beings used to be running the banks and they used to maintain the ledgers, we were talking accuracy between 85 to 93% when individuals were making entries into the ledgers. And those were further getting improved by putting a supervisor and officer on top of it. So we were talking about 93, we were talking about improving this 92 to 93, 97 and 98%. Then they went and built a layer of internal audit and control and checking, and so that the accuracy comes to 99% and 99.5%. So when we are talking about building banking AI, we need to really understand those processes, and we need to come out with those type of algorithms so that my accuracy level to begin with, we start with 85%. Then we get into the manual intervention, the supervisor, the additional thing, the challenger models, so that accuracy goes to 97%. Otherwise, this machine learning will not be of use in AI. It will not be of use when we are dealing with machine to machine, when we want to automate, when we want that machine should take the decision. So many times it is very difficult, because there is a lot of very difficult to improve upon the existing models, because it may not have the requisite information as a part of that data. So what fintech actually have brought, and what some of the leading banks actually are doing, is that they actually have gone and tapped the public data sets, because there is a lot of information. Because the most important thing is getting into this entire privacy, ethics and other things. It is very difficult to get that type of information from customer. But already customer has left behind a lot of information in the public domain. So that information which is there in the public domain, good news is government, as a part of the tax collection mechanism or as a part of the delivery of their services, they have collected a lot of data, and that data they have made it available, and that data actually has got a lot of information, and that data can be used to create the algorithms which actually can provide the starting with 85% and challenger model with 95%. And fintechs are making disruption by using that, by improving these algorithms, by creating that, so that the accuracy is really high. So when we are talking about the existing world of business analytics, Gini coefficient 70, 60, I was doing model validation. I'm part of a Journal of Risk Model Validation as an editor there. So we used to feel that Gini coefficient of 60, 70%, 80% is good, but that may not be good for AI if it has to really make the difference. It may not be good for creating that type of machine learning things. It may not be good for creating, industrializing the innovation, industrializing the things, etc. So this is basically another thing, the level of existing level of intelligence which is built by the generic AI tools. It gives an accuracy of only 30 to 70%. So I'm telling from my experience, because we went through that entire thing. We went and built homes. We went and built that actually as a part of this for finding the ultimate beneficiary owner by going through the documents, etc. And when we started talking to our customer, if accuracy level is 70 to 80%, it will not create any value, any automation, any AI will not create any value, because that 20% has to be reinvestigated, and the amount of effort required or cost required will be so high that it will be easier that we don't use any tool and we actually go back to the manual, and we may not be able to get the benefit, etc. So for this, actually, banks need to build their own AI corpus. So I keep giving one example. If you look at the development in the education side, everything started as a Bachelor of Arts. 1950s, 1850s degrees, if you go and see, even chemistry, the graduate and postgraduate was Bachelor of Arts. Then they separated, they created science. Then they separated, they created engineering separate and other thing. Then they created management separate. And now we are talking about MBA and other things in banking, insurance, actuarial science, and so on and so forth. So when we are talking about banking AI corpus, we actually are trying to create the data sets and algorithms and computation approaches and the libraries specific to the BFSI problem. Similar type of thing can be required for other industries and so on and so forth. So when we are talking about this engines of industrialization and innovation, banks, they actually are investing in creating this. And we are also talking about creating all pervasive intelligence into processes and technologies. So it's not that we are talking about automation and putting IT, but we actually are talking about making it actually as a part of the DNA. This is what is the next generation. This is where the opportunities are there for all of us. I will take pause and take question.
Good morning,
Sir,
sir.
if I may, okay.
Sorry,
Madam.
Prajwal, to interrupt. Yeah. Okay. So, so while banking 4.0 is looking very interesting and something obviously to look forward to, specifically asking for Indian banks. I mean, even today, I know that I'm going into a bank and looking for physical documents, so according to you, how far are the Indian banks from actually achieving the structure, the infrastructure that you're proposing and everything finally? Because I mean, pardon me if my knowledge is wrong about Indian banks already adopting it, but it doesn't, at least for a customer, it's not so visible that they are there yet.
Couple of things in one of my chapter, I've given some empirical studies, and where I said that they have achieved between 30 to maybe 50-60%. Only in very few cases, like opening no fringe saving account, they actually have gone with certain level of you can say building intelligence into that entire process. Maybe we can call it YONO and Kotak 811 as a part of my empirical studies, what I have done. It does not mean that others might not have done, only my knowledge may be limited. But for others, still there is a substantial work to be done. Substantial amount of work needs to be done for others. See, what is happening is, you must have heard about basically that burden or load of the debt. At present, when you actually are under high debt, at present, many of the banks, they are under the technical debt burden. They need to actually do this innovation as a BAU mode for many years to come, so that they actually pay off the technical debt burden which they actually have inherited for the last so many years for not investing into the technology. So as a part of my this one, I had interviewed also Madam Bhattacharya. She was she had at that time retired from SBI, but I was fortunate to spend some time. So I was asking her, what will happen to those banks who actually are not able to pay off their technical debt? So some of the things which we discussed was that banks actually, they are the regulated institution. They have got the customers with them. That is a competitive advantage which banks are bringing, that a license, a franchisee, as well as customer. So two things can happen. One is that those who are not able to do this innovation, they will get acquired. So you keep hearing as a part of a lot of analysis also that there are opportunity for acquisition, etc. And other is that they will actually start your white labeling. They will start white labeling the products. And I've seen that happening in certain parts, especially in Asia, Malaysia, Indonesia, etc., where some of the banks like Citi and OCBC and DBS, those who are emerged as a market leader in innovation, they actually have started reselling as a part of platform banking their services through other banks. So white labeling. So what does it basically means is that they actually are taking or outsourcing their innovation capabilities or industrialization capabilities to other banks. So these are the two things which are is happening. That will happen. This will start emerging in India also. But to reply to your question, it actually varies between maximum best is actually saving bank account, and at the lowest zero maybe the corporate accounts and the SME accounts. Would I reply?
Yeah, thank you so much.
Any other question?
Yes, sir. I have a small question regarding the model validation process. So, as you're already in that department, model validation. So, my question is pretty similar to Somaiya ma'am's question. So, how can the model validation practices be improved compared to the other foreign banks? How can the model validation practices of Indian banks be improved, and where are they lagging compared to the foreign banks?
Couple of things. One is that if you need to automate, industrialize, first is the electronification. So many banks actually have not yet done even electronification of their data. They're yet to do that electronification, because what is happening is traditionally banks have got the paper documents, unstructured data, and that unstructured data is not captured into the system. Neither they have created capabilities to use that. So that is one challenge. Other challenge is that banks have not yet started using whatever information about the customer is available in the public domain, almost at zero marginal cost. Some of them have started doing, and I've seen that now banks are asking for their tax return, their utility bills, their CIBIL scores, whether their name is there in the Manrega, what type of ration card they have got, what type of residence they have got, what type of rent they are paying. So some of these very obvious things which are connected with ability and willingness to pay. So ability to pay, probably, yes, they have got some data. So ability to pay is very important when you are giving the loan. And willingness to repay is very important when it getting converted into NPA. And if you are seeing large NPA, that is because that willingness to pay is not yet action. Some of them actually have done it now, that you have to route all the data through them, all the transactions through them. There was a circular from RBI on current account opening and other services to be used, etc. So such things are happening. I think Professor also talked about basically that it's not the data, it is the use of data. So model validation is not basically a statistical technique, because as I said, Gini coefficients are in 70-80% in most of the credit-based models. You're not yet gone and talked about 90%. So 70% means if 30% are the wrong, whether it is a type 1 error or type 2 error, it is a substantial number. So that those can be only improved when we start having the new algorithms, when we start having the new data, and when we start talking about data sets instead of database. So that is where that entire thing. So I don't know, Prajwal, whether I could reply to your question.
Yes, sir. Yes, I got it.
Any other question? So I think let me try to close this fast. So we are talking about 6 engines of innovation. I made an attempt to create, it is not going to happen overnight. It will go bottom up, one by one step at a time. So I have made actually an attempt that how this business analytics will get industrialized. Instead of one report, we will have report and dashboard in real time, dashboard with scorecard. We'll start having predictive engines. We will have predictive engines with data pipelines, with machine learning feedback loop, with Monte Carlo simulation, with text extraction bots, question answer bots, etc. And I have made an attempt to even compare that in terms of input data type, in terms of transformation, in terms of execution response, in terms of accuracy, in terms of model validation approach, output data, users execution, etc. And each line item is a world in itself. Which one I should specialize? One question was there in the previous session also. And as Professor said, it depends upon where you want to, how much you want to learn. My only suggestion as a part of my counseling and coaching thing I give them is that try to identify areas which will have the most major impact. Major impact for the purchaser of the service, who wants to implement it. It's not necessary that when there are thousands and millions, it will have impact. It is basically depend upon the firm or the bank who is going to use it. So try to get into areas which are going to create the major impact. And one other way of looking at major impact is in terms of the dollar. So how much dollar additional revenue or the saving which bank is going to have by changing this, by industrializing one of the business analytics. Start focusing on that. I call it actually riding your career on the growth of the bank or on the growth of the employer. So if we start riding on the growth, then our career also goes up. So which area to look for, which area to prioritize, it actually depends upon where is the focus, what areas your employer, your customer, your client are actually focusing on. Start focusing on that. Because when basically we actually are getting inducted into, and many of you actually as an MBA student are getting inducted into, it's basically a blank slate. You can write many stories. So which story will get you the best result? Probably that will be the sweet story. So look at the impact which actually it creates. And this is a way to look at the impact. The industrialization actually has completely changed, is going to change the skill requirement, the number of people requirement. And it's not that everything is shrinking. The predictive decision making, link it back to the predictive on this, is going to require the larger number of people, is going to require larger resources, is going to be the high paying jobs compared to the other one. So you need to really look at where the bank is going to make investment, where they are going to get it. And we have to always keep in mind, they are already in the high cost to income ratio. So that is not, it is not that they actually are there to distribute money. They want the better value for every rupee they are spending. The question is, which one they are going to spend more, where that is going to be growth. That is the area to be focused actually from our career perspective. So to look at basically from technology perspective, this is where that entire thing is actually look at. So you may try to get into digitization, adoption of cloud, industrialization, building machine interface, AI, agility, paying of technical debt, etc., and so on and so forth. This is where these are some of the areas which you can look actually from the perspective of your career opportunities also. Any question?
Good morning, sir. I had a small question. So, since we're seeing a lot of government involvement also these days in managing the banks and their NPAs, what role do you see the government or the RBI playing in this industrialization of innovation and in the integration of, this aspect into the banking sector?
Say banks are to be run by the bank management and not by the RBI or by the government. Government basically is enabler. RBI is only enabler. They actually are only trying to give the regulatory framework. So they are not running the bank actually. So as an emergency case, you must be seeing they are coming, etc. Or government is actually investor. They are owning the bank, so they want to make best use of it for in their program and other things, basically monetization program and other things. Now they already have done a lot of work. If you look at it, you look at the planning commission, they have already published document on AI and machine learning. They already have created this entire Aadhaar. Aadhaar is the best thing which can happen to any country as far as banks are concerned. Very similar to Aadhaar type of social security number in US. It costs $3.6. Nowhere, including Australia, Singapore, Europe, Aadhaar type of information is available free. So that is one. Already they are talking about, you must have seen few weeks back, the entire land record are getting electronified. They actually have gone and electronified the entire election record. They have done MSME. They are talking about electricity. They are talking about that entire electronification of the tax collection, tax filing. So already they have done their part in this entire thing. Maybe there is some work needs to be done actually by industry, banking industry, by coming together of creating this banking AI corpus, or by creating the landing platforms or selling of the NPS, etc., such type of thing probably, and it is going to happen. Maybe government and RBI may work as a catalyst, etc. But substantial amount of work needs to be done by the banks, by the industry, by banks coming together. I don't know, Sandhya, could I reply to you?
Yes, sir. I think that clarifies. Thank you.
Any other question? So let me quickly present two more slides. So it is going to be a decade dedicated to innovation. So this is inside out, this is outside in. Banks are going to build conversational banking, AI as a service, APIs, platform banking, and so on. And they are going to change their internal engines, and they are going to do automation, data infrastructure, back office, front office, cloud adoption, and so on and so forth. So ultimately, they are going to get integrated through API to the marketplace, going to build the platform banking. They will take fintech actually as a benchmark, and they will actually be complying with the changing regulatory and other requirements. Ultimately, I keep hearing, what should I do? So if we are talking about intelligence, so it should not be that we are only expert in technology or we are only expert in domain. So I keep giving example that all of us, we actually have become expert in using our mobile phone. Nobody actually told us. Probably our parents and teachers would have told us, don't use it because you are wasting so much time. But still we got and acquired the expertise. But when I tell my students, why don't you go and learn Excel? Why don't you go and learn R? The question comes is that we are not taught, etc. We were not told in many interviews, because I keep taking a lot of freshers. When I used to be in Wipro, I used to take a lot of freshers. Incidentally, I am at present Executive Director at the Institute of Actuaries of India. So I used to ask this question and I used to get this. So technology is part of my delivery. How am I going to deliver my services? I'm going to deliver it on technology. So I must learn that. If I'm talking about modeling and business analytics, if I cannot do programming, if I don't know Python and R, probably I will not be able to I will not be able to sell my services. Then we need to talk about how public data sets can disrupt the market. We have to go out of the mindset of data base to data sets. Then we need to actually, when we are talking about computation, we need to look at from various perspectives. What is the process and who are the stakeholders? And the entire automation, machine learning requires pipelines. It is not, it is basically a streaming type of thing. So we need to always think from that perspective. These are the 4 disruptions which are happening. Probably we need to look at from that perspective where the most opportunities actually are coming for all of us. I'll stop here and take question. Probably I'm late, but
thank you, sir. Due to
Yes,
paucity of time, we'll have to move ahead. So thank you for sharing your valuable insights on the transitions in business analytics, such as transformation to industrialization. There's still a long way to go, but at least there's a start. And also considering industrialization in the BFSI sector, fintech has changed the entire narrative for banking industry, and digitizing experiences is what actually is making a difference. So now we'll welcome our keynote speaker, and over to you, Prajwal. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Asta. Last but not the least, we welcome the keynote speaker of this conference, Mr. Rajesh Srivastava. He is currently a professor of supply chain management and analytics at the Florida Gulf Coast University. He is the chairperson of Information Systems and Operations Management Department at the Ludgard College of Business and manages undergraduate programs in information systems, data analytics, and supply chain management, and also a graduate program in information systems and data analytics. He is also the director of Center for Supply Chain Excellence at his university. After graduating from IIT Kanpur with a degree in electrical engineering, he started his career with Larsen & Toubro in Powai. Subsequently, he earned his PhD in business administration from the Ohio State University in 1986 and has been in academia thereafter. Sir, we now welcome you and request you to take the stage and address the audience.
Thank you very much for your kind introduction. I must say one thing, at least good morning to everyone. Although on my end, it is 12:45 in the night. But it's okay. I'm a late night bird, so it's good. First of all, I want to congratulate the organizers of this conference, that is the Business Analytics Department and KJ Somaiya Institute of Management, as well as the Somaiya with Belhekar University for organizing the conference. There's a lot of work which goes on behind the scenes in organizing a conference, and to do it for a second time requires a lot more fortitude. So congratulations on that. And we've heard some interesting speakers. I was glued to the screen, listening to what everyone had to say. So congratulations on that too. You brought in some good content. I will say one thing, Mr. Mohan Bhatia was mentioning Industry 4.0. And that's a good lead-in because Industry 4.0, the hallmark of that is digitalization. And with digitalization comes the idea of data. So we'll start from there. And I'm not sure if I have, my presentation is more general. There we go. All right. Let me just get there we are. So first of all, this is where I am. It's actually, we are at the end of my presentation. So let me go to this. What I'm going to talk about briefly is what is the future of business analytics? This has been around for a while, and I remember about six or 8 years back, I started one of the first courses in business analytics at an undergraduate program in the country. And my vision at that time was this is the future. That was quite a few years back. I looked around, and really what existed in the US at that time were a few graduate programs, but nothing at the undergraduate level. And so we designed and started the first course in analytics at that time. So here's an interesting view, and the title really doesn't mean much, but I'll explain that. This is the view of our College of Business building. Florida Gulf Coast University, being on the Gulf side of the Gulf of Mexico, resides on the Gulf, and therefore it's a beach city. And that's why you see all the palm trees and so on at this point. Now, the sculpture in front of the building is called the human race. And every time I drive in, I reflect on that, especially when you asked me to speak at this conference. I thought about that and said, that's very appropriate, because at this point, we are in a race to harness data and extract useful information. And that's what the whole area of analytics is about, is the idea that we have all this data that is being generated on a daily basis. How do we actually get a grip on that? And how do we actually extract useful information from that in order to make more informed decisions? So to give context to the idea of data, I have this quote from Eric Schmidt, the executive chairman of Google, which says, there were 5 exabytes of information created between the dawn of civilization through 2003. So that's a long period of time, but that much information is now created every 2 days. Okay. So let that sink in, the amount of data we are creating now. And to put that in further context, what's an exabyte? An exabyte is 1 million terabytes. And in 2014, Life Science estimated the limits of the internet to be about 1 million exabytes, the internet as it exists today. So how much data is transferred? According to a 2016 survey of Cisco, they estimated global internet traffic to be about 1.1 zettabytes per year, and that number increasing to 2 zettabytes. Actually, it's gone beyond that. And we estimate that by 2028 or so, we'll be talking about 40 to 60 zettabytes a year of data. And a zettabyte is 1,000 exabytes. That is the amount of data that is being created. So that's a staggering amount. And the question is, what do we do with all this data? So data, let's look at data first, because when we talk about analytics, the starting point is data, because after all, what are we doing? We're analyzing data, and we're trying to use that to create information which will help us guide in our decisions. Okay. So as far as data is concerned, there's been exponential growth of data. Why? Because these are things which didn't exist 20, 25 years back. So when we say up to 2003, of course, we didn't have those things, or not too much of it. Social media, smartphones, we've talked about those. Internet of Things. Now, Internet of Things is probably more than social media, more than smartphones. In the future, more data will get generated from Internet of Things, which are basically smart devices of different sorts. Now, the reason I say that is because smartphones have already proliferated. Pretty much everyone has a smartphone. Social media, there are enough people on social media. There are not too many more people joining social media. In fact, some people are getting fed up and leaving social media also. But the thing to note is 90% of all data created by humans has been in the last 2 years. Now, Internet of Things is interesting because it is just growing exponentially. The amount of sensors, devices, and so on. So now we have smart refrigerators, for example. Anything which is connected to the internet through Wi-Fi, any other means, is Internet of Things. And so we have smart refrigerators. So the refrigerator is going to look, sense, and tell you when it's time for you to place an order for milk, when it's time for you to restock your refrigerator, when it's time for you to clean the refrigerator. It'll tell you how long things have been in your refrigerator. So think of it. If it's going to tell you all these things, it's generating all that data. Now, you don't have that many in India because it's a different way of living. But for example, over here, with central air and central heating and so on, thermostats are now smart. Okay. So they're sending data all the time. You happen to have a Hewlett-Packard printer. That printer is sending information to Hewlett-Packard all the time. That's why Hewlett-Packard can tell you when the ink on your printer is low, or if you have a contract with them, they know when to send you the next cartridge. So these are small examples, but what we are saying is that Internet of Things is going to keep growing. Now, I'm a supply chain person. In the supply chain arena, there's going to be an explosion of Internet of Things. Okay. In logistics, tracking shipments, cold shipments. How do we ensure something which is being refrigerated and trucked, that it is at the right temperature? For example, at the beginning of the pandemic, Pfizer was shipping out its vaccines. The vaccines needed to be shipped at minus 40 degrees Fahrenheit, which is about minus 40 degrees centigrade, the same. If the temperature went above that, the vaccines would be useless. So how do you ensure that each of those containers is safe? By using Internet of Things devices, smart sensors, which monitors the temperature, which monitors the condition, and tells you if there's an abnormality. That means data is getting created. And so when we look at that, there are so many sources of data. How does a firm keep track of all of that and use that data? So further, if I look at data, what are the V's of data? One is volume, the amount of data we're creating, and there we're looking at those things we said: smart devices, smartphones, social media, and Internet of Things. Velocity of data, how quickly are we creating this data? Now, one of the hallmarks of Industry 4.0, digitalization, is that when we digitalize things, we are talking about data in real time. So the velocity, how soon, how fast, it becomes real time. In other words, the data I'm collecting now is useful now. We can't collect data today and say we'll use it 3 days from now. It's too late. Variety of data. So you have structured data, you have semi-structured data, you have unstructured data. How do I combine all that data? variability of data. Now, data, if you were to consider collecting data on a consistent basis all the time, the level of data you're collecting is the same, that's one thing, but that's not going to happen. There can be variability, seasonality, for example. That causes the amount of data to go up or down. There can be other things such as a one-off event, which requires you to collect data for that. And how do you use that data in the future? And then you can talk about the veracity of data. Data comes from different sources. How do I link the data from the different sources? How do I match the data? How do I clean the data? And how do I transform this data into the form which will be useful for me? So when we look at data, we see all these issues which come up, right? Even before we actually get to the stage of analyzing it. So I've been thinking about this and I said, data is like our oceans. We can swim in it or we can drown in it, but we cannot use it in its natural form. How can we use the water in its natural form? To use it, we must purify it. And so the same thing is true for organizations and data. We are swimming in data already. All of us are as organizations. We have enough data. Okay. With the amount of data we have started collecting, we are starting to drown in the data. Okay. In order to survive, organizations must use the data. They must extract useful information. So that brings us to how do we actually use the data? Okay. How do we manage, understand, use data? And I put in three categories. There's a lot of overlap and there's a lot of gray areas as to what is what. Data science, data analytics, business analytics. Okay. So what's the difference? Sometimes there isn't a whole lot of difference, there's blurs, but I want to distinguish between the three. So for example, what is data science to me? It is centered on building, cleaning, organizing data sets. In other words, from raw data, I want to create information. Remember, raw data is in various forms we just talked about, structured, unstructured, and so on. How do I take that and create information that I can use? So data scientists are going to work in that arena. They're going to take this raw data, various things, statistical modeling, programming, so R, Python, and the works. Okay. They're going to use that. They're going to use AI, machine learning, math, logic, all that is involved in order to simulate human reasoning. Okay. And they're going to do things like data wrangling. And then we can start getting into other things they can be doing in order to get data. For example, social media. How do I get data from social media? You could be doing things like data scraping, okay, data crawling. Okay. Now, and so Dr. Jayaraman talked about ethical part of it. And this is a gray area when you do data crawling, data scraping. How ethical is it? Okay. For what purpose is an organization going to use that data? Okay. But all of that is what data scientists would do. Okay. They have the background to do that. And so data scientists are going to get us the data into form of information. Now, let's talk about data analytics and business analytics. So data analytics and business analytics, there's not a whole lot of difference. The difference is in the end result of what we are doing. So data analytics would focus on understanding data sets, taking insights and turn that into actions. In other words, I have information. I'm using that information to get insights and then recommending an action to be taken. So you can identify trends, visualize data, develop charts, and we can talk about the types of analytics we would use: descriptive analytics, visualization. We could be talking about diagnostic analytics, prescriptive analytics, predictive analytics, all of those. Okay. So then the question is, how is business analytics different from data analytics? And I said there's a gray area, there's some blurs. To me, business analytics is when you're taking and applying it in a business setting. Okay. Applying the data analytics tools in a business setting. Okay. So, for example, when you talk about financial analytics, we talk about marketing analytics, HR analytics, supply chain analytics, those are business analytics because we are applying it in a business setting. So we look at business analytics, descriptive analytics, that tells us what happened. Because what we are doing is we're taking data which exists, we've got information from it, we're displaying the information, visualizing it, and saying, this is what happened. Diagnostic analytics would look at it and say, why did that happen? Predictive analytics will take it a step further and says, based on what already happened, what is likely to happen? And prescriptive analytics would say, what should be done about it? Okay. So as an example use case, predictive analytics. In a manufacturing environment, I could use predictive analytics for maintenance, preventive maintenance of equipment. So we could look at it and say, predict when a machine might fail. Prescriptive analytics would look at it and say, if a machine fails, what should be done about it? Okay. So then we look at it and say, okay, we know what business analytics is about. We're all scholars, we know that, or students, and we are learning about business analytics. But what is the goal of business analytics? I say the goal of business analytics is help business make smarter decisions. It's to get insights to make the decisions. And it's getting to the decision faster. Now, some things that we see will happen with this is, let's talk about trends in analytics. One thing I probably forgot to mention is when we start talking about analytics and where we are headed. For example, when we talk about marketing analytics, we are in the next few years going to be moving towards a market segment of one. We're already seeing that happen. That businesses are targeting you as an individual consumer. They are marketing, micro-marketing, because they have the data to do so. They have enough information on you, on your preferences, because they are collecting the data from social media. They're collecting the data from your web searches. They're collecting the data based on your purchasing behavior. And not even your purchasing behavior, but even if you make queries, they're collecting that data in order to micro-market. So we have noticed, we do a web search. Okay, what's the next thing which happens? What happens next time when you go and do a web search? You see, they have already suggested buys for you. you look for this might be of use, this other thing might be of use to you, or may appeal to you. So what is happening is behind the scenes, there's analytics going on. So when we talk about trends in analytics, one of the things which I believe your previous speakers also mentioned is a shortage of analysts. This is an exciting field to be in. If you're a student and you're looking out, going out into the job market, there are tremendous opportunities. We estimate here, at least in the US, that for every qualified data analyst, business analyst, who understands analytics, there are about 6 to 7 open jobs. There's such a shortage of analysts. So that's one of the trends. Why? Because all of a sudden, every organization has to have analytics in place. The wider adoption, increased reliance on large data. Now, I tend not to use the term big data. To me, there's small or average size data sets, and then they have the extremely large data sets. So when we talk about large data, this is data that we would not be able to handle using normal analysis methods. Data, for example, that I couldn't just run on Excel. Why? Because every organization is now collecting data on a scale that it cannot use or analyze using normal methods. And they're increasingly relying on that sort of data. One of the other trends we'll see is movement to the cloud. More embedded analytics. Now, embedded analytics is where the analytics is already embedded, and as far as the person who's using the analytics, the person does not have to move out of their natural language, whatever they're using, app, and go into another app to do the analytics and then come back. It's already embedded in there. A good example of that is Google Maps. If I am driving, I have set Google Maps on my phone, and it's giving me the directions. I take a different path, it automatically recalculates. So the analytics are already embedded in it. We don't have to go out of Google Maps and then re-enter in order to make that change. So we're going to see more and more embedded analytics. Augmented analytics is, again, something we'll see. In this case, we're talking about, when we talk about extracting data and getting to information, and machine learning, so on, is further analytics will be built in at that stage. And then there'll be growth in machine learning. These are some of the trends in analytics that we see are going to be happening. And along with that, data in the future. Because we're collecting so much data, which we want to use, analyze, and be able to use that information to make informed decisions, we want to make sure that the data that we are collecting is used correctly, which means data quality management, data privacy, and personalization. And that's an interesting concept. We are concerned about our data, information on us, which firms are collecting. I jokingly tell my students that there's enough data on us out on the internet that they could clone us if they wanted to. And it's not a real joke, though. It probably is enough data out there. So our concern as consumers is data privacy. At the same time, because we are so reliant, we would also like to see offers made personally for us. In other words, personalization of marketing for us. So there are two extremes. One says, I want privacy, but the other says, I also want this personalization. How does a firm balance the two? Talk about data governance and then data security. Now, data security is going to become an extremely important consideration. I was talking to my students last week and we were talking about Internet of Things. And I said, what's the biggest problem with Internet of Things? Say for our own home, I have 10 devices which are connected to the internet. That's 10 potential hacking points for someone to be able to hack into my home. Similarly, for an organization, if I have 100 IoT devices, that's 100 possible hacking points. So how do I create data security? That becomes an important consideration. Now, in the future, we're going to be talking about things such as blockchains in order to encrypt and secure the data. So there are going to be things in the future that we have to look at as far as data is concerned. So in closing, I'm going to leave you with the following quote from Tom Davenport, who is a very prolific writer in analytics, very well known, and professor and distinguished professor in IT at Babson. Every company has big data in its future, and every company will eventually be in the data business. It's a profound thought. Basically, no company will be able to function without using the data that it has. It will have to make use of the data in order to make its informed decisions. Without data, it's not going to survive. And that is our university, Product Approach University. Just a brief on our university, it's 25 years old. We're just celebrating its 25th anniversary. It's a state university. And our College of Business is AACSB accredited. Notice that somewhere on your website that you are in the process of going through AACSB accreditation. That's good, and good luck with that one. That's the end of my presentation. It's brief, and it was a high level, looking down on analytics at a 30,000 feet level, looking down. You already had more detailed presentations, which were probably more in line with the conference, but this is a bigger picture view of where we are, where we need to go. And given the proliferation in data, what is it that we need to do? Where does business analytics fit into the big picture? Because we need to be very clear about what we want to do. And so hopefully that's where I left it. Questions from anyone?
Professor, I have a question.
Yes.
So in US, there is a lot of difficulty in Canada as well about the truck drivers.
I didn't get the last part of your question.
US and Canada were facing the truck drivers' problem for supply chain.
Mm-hmm.
And another example of where in some ways, I don't know whether analytics people fail to use analytics in the right way, or we fail to see the supply chain in totality, where Indian automobile industry was facing the semiconductor chip issue. So can you tell us something about that? How can analytics be useful over there, or what happened exactly there?
Okay. So as far as supply chains are concerned, because this was a global impact of the pandemic, consider this, that supply chains, and you're talking about my area now, so I can answer about, I could go on about supply chains for the next hour, but let's keep it brief on that, is that for every firm, their supply chain is global. Almost every firm, at least in the US, is pretty global. And it's complex because it's not just, when I say global, limited to suppliers being in one country. The US, for example, may have a supplier in China, but the Chinese supplier may be getting its raw materials from some other country, labor from somewhere else, and so on. For example, Vietnam is a big manufacturing center for furniture right now, but the labor comes from Indonesia and Philippines. And so when the pandemic shut everything down, it disrupted everything in the supply chain. And data in supply chains, when you have that complex, it's very hard to keep track of. Now, what are the advances? For example, there are companies in the US such as Fourkites or Project 44, which provide real-time visibility in terms of tracking shipments. So these two companies, as an example, can tell you where every ship in the world is at any point in time to within 5 or 10 minutes of where they are. They can also tell you what is the cargo on every ship, which customers' cargoes are on every ship, what are the goods on every ship. They can tell you that. So that is real-time visibility of data. And if I have that sort of real-time visibility, I can make much better decisions. So that's why we're talking about digitization, because digitization of data will lead us to real-time data. Take another area where traditionally there has been a lot of paperwork, is in freight forwarding, where if I want to send something, I have to go to a freight forwarder who's going to file different types of paperwork, find a supplier, negotiate with the supplier. The whole thing takes about a week. If I go digital on it, it's just a matter of a minute or two. In minutes, I can get the same thing done. That means I am operating in real time, and therefore the data is valuable. And therefore, whatever analysis I do on the data makes sense. If the data is a week old, it doesn't make any sense. I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, thank you so very much. It has.
So if there are any more doubts, they can just ask it out or can put it in the chat box.
Could you repeat that again?
Yeah. If there are any more doubts, you can just ask it out, raise your hand, or put it in the chat box. If not, we can end the forum.
There are no questions in the chat box as of now. I think we can conclude.
Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate that, because in 6 hours' time, again, I have to be at my university. That's morning for me at that time.
So yeah.
But,
thank you, sir.
I look forward to that, and perhaps on my next trip to, I used to call it Bombay because when I was there, it was Bombay, but it's Mumbai now. I understand that. So I will certainly give a call and maybe pay a visit. Okay. And that might be later this year. So I would actually look forward to meeting you in person. Zoom has been a boon, but it's also been hard on us, not having that face-to-face interaction.
Yes, sir. So I'd like to conclude this forum. And thank you, sir. Thank you a lot for such informative insights about the future of business analytics and its new trends, and also giving a whole new perspective on the human race. It was really incredible to know.
Well, it's just that something I've been looking at every day.
Yes, sir. It was really a new way to look into it. So it was also great to know about the data and processing involved in capturing and analyzing and using it. And also thank you for giving your time, and sorry for spoiling your sleep.
That's fine. We can all do with less sleep at times. So thank you again for inviting me, and look forward to continuing conversations.
Sure, sir. So
thank you again.
With that, we will now be ending the